Hey guys, Kuzo here, back with another video, and in this video today we're going to be doing another epic splash page illustration. In this illustration we're going to be drawing Senku, Taiju, and Tsukasa from Dr. Stone. And I thought this would be fun since the anime had just come out recently. I think it's got about 3 episodes now. And I've actually only watched episode 1 of Dr. Stone. But hold on, there's a reason why I've only watched episode 1. So even before the anime season had started for this title, I had already read 2 chapters of Dr. Stone and I had liked the direction it was going in. And I just never really got around to continuing reading it. And this is when it very first came out. So I read 2 chapters and just never really got around to it again. When the anime season started, I decided to watch episode 1, and it really reminded me of those first 2 chapters, you know, obviously since it's based off of it, but it reminded me of reading those first 2 chapters and how much I actually liked them. So I decided to go and see kind of where the manga was and how many chapters of the manga had come out since, and I started reading where the anime left off, you know, from the first episode. And from there, I pretty much just read a bunch of chapters of the manga, and I really like the manga so far, and I like the direction it's going, and I could see where it's going to be going in the whole, you know, first season based on what I've read. But just letting you guys know, if any of you are anime onlys, I would definitely suggest the manga. The art's really fantastic too. And it's kind of funny because I haven't really picked up a whole lot of new series or really been keeping up with a whole lot of series recently, and Dr. Stone is something that definitely intrigued my interest when I started reading past those, you know, first few chapters, and I just saw the direction it was going, and it's within the same mold as, you know, it's obviously a shonen, it's a shonen manga, so it has that mold, but it's also different in its own sort of way, and I really like that about the series. And one of the cool things that I've heard from people who have read further in the manga than I have is that the second arc is actually better than the first arc, so I'm really excited for that because I already like the first arc as it is, so if it gets better than that, we're all in for a treat. Yeah, let's get into talking a little bit about the splash page and what's going on here. The pencil I'm using here is a 0.7 disposable Bic mechanical pencil. I normally get them in like the bulk pack, so that way it's a little bit cheaper in the long run, and I'm just using the lead that comes with it. The paper I'm using is some sort of smooth bristleboard paper, and I don't really care what kind of paper it is, as long as it's smooth and, you know, it feels nice to draw on. I typically like the paper. Actually, for a while there, for my redesign series, I was using some paper that I tore out of a sketchbook that I kind of liked the paper in it because it wasn't as thick as this bristleboard paper, but it was really smooth and it was just thick enough for it to work really well for sketching, and I could have inked on it if I wanted to. I've actually inked a few things on it before. But yeah, just because I really liked how smooth it was, I tore it out of the sketchbook and I used them for some of the videos. Even before the bristleboard paper I'm using here and the sketchbook paper I was talking about, I often use printer paper just to draw on. Even for videos on this channel, I use printer paper quite often. And in this portion right now, I'm just kind of, you know, finalizing Taiju based on the general shape I got at first. And that's pretty much how I start all my illustrations, is just kind of like a general shape of the characters, try to make sure I got them in the right spot. And then I start just putting in everything that really makes up the character, their clothes and, you know, face, facial expressions, all that sorts of stuff. That general shape stage is one of the most important parts because that's pretty much the foundation to where everything's going to be going, and if that's off, then a lot of your other things in the illustration are going to feel off, because that's where you're getting the placement, the positions, you know, really the poppiness to the illustration is all in that composition and posing. Those of you who watch a lot of my videos already know I typically don't put a bunch of characters on one page, especially with my redesign series, because it's typically revolving around one character, but taking on these splash pages have been really fun, and I feel like they're also a lot more fun for a video because there's just a lot more going on. And at the end, I feel like the end product is also a lot more fun to see too, because there's just so much going on. Like kind of a little bit of an artist journey instead of just one character. 'Cause who knows, maybe you didn't like the character I drew, but in the splash page you get 3 characters and maybe your favorite characters on the page. I don't know. If you like this bottom character too much, I don't know about you, man. I don't know about you. Tsukasa's got a bit of a warped view of the world. But yeah, while we're on the subject of Tsukasa, might as well talk about him since we're also drawing him. He was definitely one of the hardest characters to draw on this page, not just his position, but also like his whole getup with the lion fur and how much hair he has, and the position I really put him in made his hair like flying everywhere. So he definitely had a lot going on in this illustration. And pretty much the hardest thing to draw on him was definitely his hair, trying to get the flow going right. It was very difficult. With how rough the very first rough sketch was, it was kind of hard to work off that, but I started to whittle away at it one step at a time, and eventually finished it. So it was kind of like a process of just, drawing, erasing a little bit, drawing, erasing a little bit, and before I knew it, kind of had the whole general shape of it. And I was like, oh, okay, that worked. Sometimes when you kind of think about the whole end product and how much you have to go through, it's a little bit overwhelming, so it's always good to just take it one little step at a time. We have actually started inking now, and I always start off with a 0.5 micron when I'm actually using microns. If I'm using something else, I don't know, whatever size it is. I just don't like to go too thin with it because just the edges don't work as well, and I have a little bit more width variant when I'm using 0.5. I used to use 0.3 a lot more, but it just feels a little too thin. Fun fact, when I was inking, I started running out of a lot of ink in a lot of my pens, and I had a lot of backstock pens, but before I knew it, now I'm starting with doing these illustrations, and some illustrations I did before, but especially these ones. Since they're so big, I didn't realize how much ink it actually takes up, so I started running out of ink from all of my pens, and I started bringing in some random pens that I don't really use as much to try to fill in some blacks and stuff like that. It was an interesting process because it kind of takes you out of the zone when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm recording and I'm running out of all this ink. Don't worry guys, I worked through it. It was a hard one. No, I'm kidding. But it really does suck when you start running out of ink when you're inking, and that's something I don't run into when I'm drawing digitally, okay? So I was just like, come on, man, come on! But I do have a G pen with some ink, and the ink is kind of old, so it's not as thin as it used to be. Like, when I say old, I'm talking about like, I don't know, it might be like 5-6 years old, so it's a little thicker than it should be, and I don't know how well it will work, but from a next traditionally drawn illustration that I actually ink for this channel, I will probably be using the G pen, and hopefully the ink isn't too thick because actually I have quite a bit of it, and it would probably last me through quite a few traditional illustrations, so that'd be fun if it actually does work. And now just talking about it kind of got me excited to actually try it out. I actually really want to try it out now, because as cool as it is to ink with microns and stuff like that, I haven't inked with the G pen in so long, and it's actually really fun. It's going to bring back a lot of good memories because I used to ink a lot of manga pages with that and just illustrations with that, and yeah, it's going to bring back a lot of memories. And you might even think, well, why haven't you been using it to begin with, Kuzo? If you have it, you might as well use it. Well, the whole reason is because microns are just really clean, and you can just stop and start, open the pen, it's a lot more fluent when you're using these. As I can't tell you how many times I've actually spilt that ink. Okay, I haven't actually spilled it that many times. It must be like 3 times I've actually spilt that ink I used for the G pen. But the thing is, I haven't used it in so long, I could see myself being clumsy and just spilling it everywhere, and I would be super mad about that. But basically, it's just easier to use the microns. But also, one of the really cool things about the G pen, other than it being fun to use, is in the long run it is a lot cheaper than using microns, because microns can get pretty expensive, especially when you're using them a lot, and G pens, they kind of last a long time as long as you're not too rough with the nib, and the ink also lasts a long time if you kind of buy it in bulk. Man, my voice like almost just went out there for whatever reason. And so the pen that I'm using here, I actually talked about in the Kimetsu no Yaiba illustration, is just like a Pentel stylo thing, and this pen's pretty cool, but the thing is, once again, for some reason these pens just run out of ink so darn fast. So I started running out of ink in this one, and I had another one. I switched between them, and you'll see me eventually switch over to this marker right here, which is just a Copic one. Then I switched to another one real quick, and that one was completely out of ink. And then I switched to this pen that I'm using right here, and I don't really use this one. I think they're like Pigma or something. I don't know what they are, and I don't really use that pen very much. And like I said, I was running out of ink, so I just started grabbing pens that I had to try to be able to ink this illustration with. But yeah, for all in all, the pens I pretty much used here, or would to at least prefer to use here, are just from 0.3 all the way up to 0.8 for microns, and then a permanent marker for fill-ins. But the permanent marker was kind of thick, so the permanent marker is so thick that I got to fill in parts of lines for the blackouts. So I got to fill out little pieces of edges that I know that the Sharpie wouldn't be able to get into, so that way when I do the blackouts I don't, you know, mess up and stuff like that. But since I was running out of ink in these pens here, I didn't really want to use those to fill in those little spots that I need to fill in for the permanent marker to work. So you'll see me at some point using the permanent marker, but then I actually switch over to a brush pen, a Pentel brush pen, to start filling in the blackouts, because I had that off to the side and I was like, why am I not using this for blackouts? I need to use this because I'm running out of ink everywhere. So I actually just finished the line art and I erased all the pencils underneath, and here I'm actually going in to add a piece of Senku's costume that I actually forgot. I forgot all, you know, like the bandages on the arm and stuff, so I had to draw it in and then white out the arms and then draw over the bandages again, so that way, you know, seemed like it was there all along. But one thing I would definitely have to say, oh, there we go. I actually forgot the double sleeves as well, so I had to do that. But one thing I have to say is don't be afraid to use whiteout, as long as you have, you know, some good whiteout. But don't be afraid to use it, because whiteout is actually a really big part of a lot of comic and manga artists, you know, workflow. Whether it be for effects or actually just fixing a mistake, like how I made. So now we're pretty much just at the point in the illustration where I'm doing blackouts and putting in hatch marks and details into the illustration. And this is one of the parts of the illustration that I like the most, because I can kind of just have fun and relax and fill in these blacks and stuff. And this is the part where you get to see it really start coming alive, I feel like. And part of this might also have to be with the fact that it's also a little bit easier to see what I'm doing when I'm just doing kind of like bigger details like this, or like smaller. When they're like hatch mark details, it's not that hard to actually perform those, but when it comes to actually inking the line work and stuff, you have to be very accurate. And my eyes are pretty bad, and so when I'm recording, it's really hard to see smaller details, especially when the phone's like right in front of my face. You should see it. It might be like an inch away from my face when I'm recording. I'm over here trying to like squint at the paper to make sure I'm getting the right spot. And one of the things that really stressed me out is when I'm doing eyes, because I have such a hard time like seeing it. I'm like, oh no. But I am proud of the fact that out of all the eyes in this illustration, I didn't mess up on any of them, so I was happy about that. And just to talk a little bit about hair shines and kind of like the technique to that, there's no really like one way to tell you how to do that, but I will let you guys know that I used to always have a really hard time with those things, and it was really just practice and studying other people and how they did it in order for me to, you know, learn how to do it. Once I learned how to do it, I did it over and over and over and over and over again in order to learn the technique and find the fastest way to do that technique. But I just want to let you guys know that there was definitely a time for me where I really felt like I just wasn't getting it, and I thought it was like impossible, and I was just like, man, how do these people even do this? But it just really comes with practice, and you know, practice makes perfect. And as you know, stupid as that sounds, it really is the truth. You just got to put yourself out there and really just try your hardest. But yeah, speaking about hair shines, I'm about to get to Tsukasa's hair, and my goodness, that guy has a mane of hair on his head. But even though it was difficult, it was definitely a very fun thing to do, because it was really cool to watch it all come together. And one thing I always kept in mind when doing it was trying to make sure it always got much darker towards the edges and a lot of the highlights being closer to the top of his head. Because if I went with too many highlights, it just would have been oversaturated and it just would have looked really weird. So I wanted to make sure I had a good balance of solid blacks and highlights, because I've had my fair share of times where I've gone overboard with the detail and it ended up looking really weird. So I wanted to make sure I didn't do that with this and waste the time on creating unnecessary detail that would end up just blacking out anyways. So I kept that in mind from previous experiences. But yeah, you can see what I was talking about earlier, where I try to go with the permanent marker, and once it gets to the thinner edges, I'll come in with a micron or something like that in order to fill in the other spots and maybe put in a shine here and there, and then go back to the permanent marker. And there's a point where, like I said, I eventually start there I brought in another pen. I eventually start using the brush pen, and it's probably going to happen here pretty soon, because the ink on those little black pens I started to bring in started to run out as well. And when I was using the micron pen, I didn't want to use it that much because that was my line art pen, and I just didn't want to run out. So I brought in this Copic pen, and it was too big. It was too big to use, so I was like, oh man. And here I'm just about to use the brush pen, and man, ooh, those were definitely a lifesaver. But in any case, if you guys want to help support my artists, help support what I do on this channel, you guys can check me out on my Patreon, link in the description. I also want to let you guys know that my Patreon, other than having the other perks that are already there for a little bit extra tutorials and stuff like that, it's also now a place that you can get exclusive content for my Manga Bounties Gate before its public release, and a bunch of little bonus things like that. And I'm pretty excited because I'm just about to finish up the storyboard for the first chapter, and I'm going to be starting the final draft, which my Patreons will be getting all the exclusive content for that before it ever comes out to the public. So I'm super excited for that. But I'd like to take this time to actually thank my current Patreons, which I do actually need to update this list. So don't worry, if you're a new Patreon and you don't see your name on this list, it definitely will be in the next video for sure. But I'd like to thank my patrons: 19 Black Dragon 89, Aaliyah Williams, Aaron McQuiston, Alpha Dog Studios, Anya, Benjamin Thoma, Connor, Daniel Hilliard, Daniel Hutchinson, Dope Closet, Grimoff, Ian Dobb, Joe, Johnny Boy Draws, Josh Aguilera, JT, Kyla Smith, Leo McIntyre, Licor, Marek Karaz, Maricuzio, Monso, Nate Lee, Noah Henderson, Prathana, Ryan, Satoshi, Slow Days, Safine, Spencer Davis, Arjun, Wear My Crown, Wes Fletcher, William, and Woody Olis. Big shout out to everyone else who is supporting me that isn't on this list yet, but it will be in the next video when it's updated. You guys are the best pensionobis there are and help me be able to do what I do on this channel. But in any case, if you guys like this video, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you're new to this channel like you should see, please subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified when each video comes out. And like always guys, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.